Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a thrilling episode of the Jim Cornette Experience here, wherever you steal your favorite podcasts. I'm Jim Cornette, and today, so much on the program. When is a receipt not a receipt? More on why I avoid airports. I have traumatized another child, and we'll have the details on that. And our special guest today from the dark side of the ring, the smash hit program on Viceland Television. It's its narrator, the legend himself, Dirty Dutch Mantell. But to join me today, so much to talk about, and big breaking news that he doesn't even know. Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you. He's the post office playboy, Swammy's pappy, Susie's favorite boy, the proprietor of the French Toast Chateau, and so much more. The great Brian Last. And he's also an enemy of bad shoot interviews.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again. If you do bad shoot interviews, go fuck yourself. I will keep laughing in your face, baby.
What, have you now become the shoot interview police? Can't people just go out and produce their own amateurish, poor quality videos without being hounded by you?
People can do whatever they want to do. However, I do think it's important to point out that in this business that has such a tough time tracking its history and making sure that its history is captured, there are people who love wrestling seemingly to the point where they just need to sit down with wrestlers and interview them who know nothing about the wrestler, wrestling history, or anything else. So yeah, I call those motherfuckers out, and I'll keep doing that. There are very few people who have done shoot interviews who have actually done a good job and put effort in. And a lot of people seem to want me to do some shoot interviews. We'll see what happens.
How about me now? I thought my shoot interviews were at least tolerable.
I said there were some people that did some good shoot interviews.
Some other people, just that some people that did good ones and some other people do bad ones.
The vast majority are dog shit. But there are some people who are talented, who know wrestling history, know how to host something, who don't sound like creeps. You happen to be one of them.
Well, thank you very much. I do highly appreciate that, and I want you to know that I will take that compliment with me as one of the highlights of my career.
You know what? Thank you. That means a lot to me.
Well, I just wanted to please you today, Brian. And by the way, if you're going to do stuff, folks, do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff.
Yes, that's the next T-shirt, by the way.
More good stuff and less bad. I've got a bunch of bad stuff over here. You know, I was going to talk about my plumbing story yesterday here at the castle. You know, it's spring again, and it's yard work season again, and it's improvement, renovation, construction weather again. Yesterday, I had 2 guys painting the fence, 3 guys mowing the yard, 2 different plumbing crews, and a shit pumping truck out here at Castle Cornette. You know, we used to be out in the woods out here. It used to be very rural, and we have septic tanks. And now the city has found us, but fuck them. I don't want to be hooked up to any of their stuff in case something would happen, that the things might crawl through those pipes to come into my home. When I bring the security dome down, I don't want any breaches. But anyway, we've had almost everything in the whole house, top to bottom and out in the yard, replaced or renovated or updated or whatever the case may be, except we found out by digging this up yesterday that apparently on the old grease traps to go to the old septic tanks, they use those old, I say old because they're very old, ceramic tile pipes. And apparently after 60 years or so, those sometimes just cave in and crumble. Ooh. And just so. But the good news is you don't need a septic tank anymore, or not a grease trap anymore. They said, no, that's a 50s and 60s thing. We don't do that anymore. We'll take that right out for you. Tie everything right into the septic tank. You're free to go. And it just costs $4,500 to just dig giant holes in the front of my. So anyway.
Jeez.
But I don't have to worry about any of these things, Brian, because this is news even to you. This happened right before we sat down to tape this fine program, right before airtime, as they say. I'm afraid to say that this will be the final Jim Cornette Experience. I'm not doing the drive-thru anymore. I'm closing down Cornette's Collectibles. I'm not going to be doing anything professionally involved with wrestling or appearing in front of the public anymore because I've got the deal of a lifetime and it's too good to pass up. And I'm taking it. I'm cashing in.
This is indeed news to me. I don't know what you're talking about or where you're going.
I just got the email confirmation of the deal of a lifetime that I've been waiting on for years and years has come. Listen to this email that I just got. Dear friend, it's my pleasure to contact you through this media as I am in need of your urgent assistance. My names are Mrs. Aisha Gaddafi, a single mother and a widow with 3 children. I am the only biological daughter of late Libyan President Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. I have no, it's not funny the man's dead. I mean, he may have done
he was a horrible human being.
but,
yeah, he was a pretty bad
but
motherfucker.
you shouldn't laugh at anybody's death except certain people. But anyway, I have an investment funds worth $28,400,000 United States dollar. And she wrote it out in numbers too, just so I'd get the point. And I need an investment manager partner. And because of the asylum status, I will authorize you the ownership of the funds. However, I'm interested in you for the investment project assistance in your country. Maybe from there, we can build a business relationship in the near future. $28,400,000. I am willing to negotiate investment business profit sharing ratio with you based on the future investment earning profits. If you are willing to handle this project, kindly reply urgent to enable me provide you more information about the investment funds. Your urgent reply will be appreciated. Capitalized. Best regards, Mrs. Aisha Gaddafi.
You know what you should do? You should forward that to Joe Pedicino.
No, I don't want him to get the money. The widow, and you know that late Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, as crooked as he was, he stashed some money. And this woman, being the only biological daughter of him, naturally would have this money. I bet she might even have more than $28,400,000. And I'm going to get me some. And as it clearly states, and by the way, I think for English being her second language, she did a good job there.
Not terrible.
It clearly states that she is willing to negotiate. I bet you I can get a good part of that. So fuck the podcast, fuck the whole business. I'm getting Muammar Gaddafi's money.
Hopefully you don't meet Muammar Gaddafi's end. Did you ever see how he died? Did you ever see that video?
I was about to say which end, but I'll go for this. No, what did they do to him? I don't know.
They dragged him out of a giant pipe that he was hiding in. And then a bunch of his former citizens beat the shit out of him, and someone took a knife and stuck it up his ass, and then he bled to death in the back of a van.
And there's tape of this?
A pickup truck. It was a pickup truck surrounded by gleeful citizens of the country he formerly led.
Well, you know, Donald Trump always aspires to top everybody and everything.
You know, Gaddafi stayed on Trump's property when he came into New York for the UN a few years back, before he died, obviously. No one in New York would let him stay in any of the hotels.
Except Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, they put a tent on like one of his, I think one of his golf courses. They put a tent there for Gaddafi and his female army. You know, he had like a bunch of female bodyguards. All his bodyguards were these big females. He had no male bodyguards.
And apparently they didn't do a very good job because he got a knife shoved up his ass and bled to death in the back of a pickup truck. That indicates to me I would acquire new bodyguards. All right, but we'll continue with the program today.
The listeners will miss it.
But you know, I don't mean to leave everybody on short notice, but if for some reason she doesn't want to play ball, I guess I'll be back next week. But you know, but she sounds awful hot to trot there on this business deal.
What a cliffhanger.
Well, if you hear me next week, it didn't work out, folks. But one thing now, wait a minute. Now, I guess I shouldn't spread rumors because you're not going to hear us this coming Monday on the drive-thru. And it is entirely my fault and the fault of the shit pumping truck and all this other stuff. I've had a lot going on over the weekend. The plumbers were here 3 different days in a row to fix some other things and determine what the fuck the situation was. So I had demands on my time, and I was unable to record the drive-thru when Brian was willing, although barely. You were barely willing. You were giving me that fucking kind of ass backwards. Oh, sure, I'll do it. Yeah.
That is not in any way what happened.
I'm willing to do it, but you don't want to.
We finished the drive-through, and I said, all right, are you ready for the next one? And you went, oh boy. Like you were ready. You were ready for a nap or something.
Well, I've got a lot on my plate here lately with being, and as we'll talk about the smash hit television show, Dark Side of the Ring on Viceland is now the most watched original program ever airing on that network. Just so everybody knows. And we're going to talk to the narrator of that fine program later on today on the program, Dirty Dutch Mantell. But, and another reason, honestly, why I couldn't do the drive-thru is because I wanted to get to the customers at Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com, because the new products have been flying off the shelves. And I wanted to make sure that they were all serviced, because you know me, when I have a customer, I want to make sure that customer is serviced to the point where they just can't hardly breathe. And I service the customers despite all these plumbing catastrophes. If you have ordered from Cornette's Collectibles before Tuesday morning, what was that, the 14th?
Yes.
Your shit's already on the way to you. Except for one person, I'm waiting on a straight shooting series DVD sets. We're restocking those DVDs, but one person. But otherwise, everything's already on its way to you, because that's how I roll. I take care of my customers, no matter whether I sleep or not, Brian. No matter whether I get rest or not. No matter whether I'm on the verge of a mental or physical breakdown, the Cornette's Collectibles customers get serviced.
Again, we say it every time. You have had the busiest retirement that I've ever seen.
Well, you say it every time to keep reminding me to rub it in. Anyway, no, by the way, folks, the new Hate is a Hell of a Motivator t-shirts are selling like wildfire, and Tommy Rich could sell his ass off too. So even if you don't want to buy one of the shirts, just now that it's up on the site, the design is so hilarious. The fine folks at Collar and Elbow did a tremendous job. The Good Brothers Inc. They got 18 businesses. But just go to jimcornette.com, click on collectibles, and go to the t-shirts and look at the design, even if you don't want to buy the shirt. It's a great design. Hate is a Hell of a Motivator t-shirt. And also, and by the way, $5 off every one of those shirts goes to the WHAS Crusade for Children. The telethon is June 1st and 2nd. If you want to donate directly, WHAScrusade.org. But you can also still get the signed Midnight Express reunion pictures. Condrey, Eaton, Lane, and Cornette, and the Eaton and Lane combo of the Midnight Express with myself, all autographed. $5 off the purchase price of each of those goes directly to the American Cancer Society in honor of Dennis Condrey. So we're raising money for the Crusade and the American Cancer Society. And I'm making sure that all these things go out as quickly as possible. And it's a challenge, but I'm up to it, my boy.
I have no comeback for that.
Well, just let me breathe. No, I've got a note here. So here's another thing. See, I got to know. I got all this stuff scribbled down on notes, pads of paper, because some of these things are just so good. I say I want to talk about it on the show. Florida doesn't have all the lunatics. Okay. Everybody says the state of Florida is where all the fucking crazy people go. Well, actually, we know that's not true. They're on the news every day. But Kentucky has chimed in. Guess what happened at the Louisville airport the other day?
I don't know.
The police come to the airport, and I'm trying to get clarification. Either the passengers were on the plane and the cops came on the plane and took him off, or the passengers were waiting to get on the plane. And the cops came, American Airlines flight, the cops came and took the pilot off the plane. Often you think, well, does this mean he was drunk? No. It means he was arrested and charged with burglary, arson, and triple homicide.
Holy shit. Wow.
This fucking guy, apparently, from the way they tell it, as we used to say, in 2015 down in Pembroke, Kentucky, which is right on the North Carolina, Tennessee, it's down there in the Smokies somewhere. This guy, he shot and killed one guy and left him in his cellar and they found the guy's wife and a neighbor in a burned car in a field nearby. This was about 4 years ago.
Wow.
And they're highly convinced, apparently, that he done it. So another reason that I avoid airports at all cost. Triple homicide, burnt 2 and left 1 in the cellar.
Was he a good pilot?
I don't know about his professional rap. They said, actually, American Airlines did issue a statement, said we put a background check on him. We talked to him. He said he'd never killed 3 people nor burned any bodies. So we naturally let him control people's lives. Anyway, that's why I will be driving this weekend to Richmond, Virginia, to the Holiday Inn at 4303 Commerce Road, where guess what, folks? It's TMPT Con 3 with the Midnight Express, all of us, Eaton, Lane, Condrey, and myself, plus the Rock and Roll Express, both of them, plus J.J. Dillon, plus Shane Douglas. There's a whole plethora of folks available. And it's 9 to 3 on Saturday, May 18th, the Fan Fest. And then, as we've been talking about, I will be doing a live VIP Q&A pizza party from around 3:30 when the Fan Fest is over until whenever we get finished telling stories and eating pizza. And I think there are still a few tickets available, possibly at the door, as they say. Well, just come and make a fuss, and we'll get you in some way or another. You might not be able to sit down, but we'll get you in. And while I'm at it over the next couple of months, you can also see me Saturday, June 1st in Milwaukee /Waukesha for Major League Wrestling. The MLW special, live special on BN Sports will air that night at 9 o'clock Eastern, and we're going to be taping a bunch of other stuff for BN Sports in the following weeks. That's Saturday, June 1st in Milwaukee /Waukesha. And then Thursday, June 6th, Brian, you remember this. It's Pro Wrestling Night at Florence Freedom in Florence, Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati, the Florence Freedom and the Windy City Thunderbolts. Take me out to the ball game. And it's dollar beer night because it's WEBN Thirsty Thursday. But I will be there with Jim Ross, Billy Gunn, Marty Jannetty, and a whole bunch of baseball fans. We're going to do a VIP meet and greet. The tickets are on sale now, FlorenceFreedom.com. And we're going to have a fine old time. What do you think about that?
I got a question I popped up while you were plugging that event. Have you ever, I know you get along with Shane Douglas fine now, but have you ever actually discussed with him since 89 everything that went down with that match/angle that he had Jim Herd kill?
I never felt the need to bring it up with him afterwards because I thought it was obvious to him when they lost pretty much every match they had for the next 6 weeks or so and then got broke up that he probably, well, see, that's actually the deal was it was the heat with Flair because here's to be honest, at the time we all started somewhere. Here's an underneath baby face that calls Jim Herd, who Ric Flair already likes about as much as he likes mold on his taint, complaining about the way that he was being featured and used when it was against another member of the booking committee who had specifically come up with that to give the Dynamic Dudes something to do on television because Herd hated them as bad as he hated the Midnight Express. Well, maybe not quite.
Didn't he?
He hated them as bad as he. No, well, let me finish my thought. Herd hated me worse than he hated the Midnight Express. He hated the Dudes and the Express evenly. As long as they worked with each other, he didn't give a shit. So that's the one program that actually got through where everything made sense because he didn't care. And then he hated me worse than everybody. But no, that's why Flair was like, well, fuck it. Then just beat them. They'll never get five. The whole idea was setting up to get 5 minutes with the manager at all the house shows where they would get 5 minutes with me and blah, blah, blah. But he said, fuck it, just beat them. So the only time in history, the 5-minute manager stipulation, the baby faces didn't win and get the 5 minutes with the manager. We just beat him every night. Anyways, but no, he was in favor of it at the time when it was envisioned, but I'm going to be honest, I don't know the complete genesis, but it was under the summer booking committee with folks like JR and I think Kevin may have been on it at that point, but I don't think it was Kevin's idea. it was an idea from the previous administration that these guys with skateboards and bright fluorescent colors, and then they found out one of the guys couldn't even ride the fucking skateboard. Guess which one?
Yes.
Well, it only took you one guess. So that's why he just run down the ramp and carry it. Like, yeah, hey, you know. He didn't look cool with the backwards baseball cap, although most people don't, but he looked even more fucking dweebish, as they used to say. So no, we haven't discussed it, but I think he kind of got the idea afterwards that it might not have been the best thing to do. If it hadn't been for that angle, I don't know that they'd have been on television. But anyway. Oh, wait a minute. I've got an email. Speaking of, this was almost this time, just a couple of years earlier. I have traumatized another small child. And I was kind of proud of this one, so I wanted to bring it up. Timothy, I will not give a last name. But Timothy wrote, Mr. Cornette, my son is 10 and an avid current wrestling fan. As a deal, I'll allow him to watch current WWE if he watches older wrestling shows like Mid-South, Jim Crockett, etc. with me. When we watch older wrestling shows that you appear on, he generally will say things like, well, that's not nice, or who does that guy think he is? But recently, after watching the Fireball incident with Ronnie Garvin, it upset him greatly. And then after listening to an interview you conducted about the incident afterwards, he stood up and yelled, Jim Cornette, you fucker, and ran out of the room very distraught. When you appear on television, he stands up and says, I just can't, and excuses himself out of the room. My questions are, how does it feel to be still upsetting people by your promos a generation later? Incidentally, my son told his mother I made him watch a program where a man with a tennis racket set another man on fire, so we're both grounded from TV for a bit. My other question is, how did you come down from the adrenaline rush of arena shows where you started riots repeatedly? You don't seem like a hot bath and scented candle kind of guy.
See, that is a great question because I know a lot of musicians.
That's why I read the fucking email.
I know a lot of musicians that after a concert, that's, when they want to do their drugs and have a good time because they want to keep that energy up. When you leave an arena and people are trying to kill you and people are screaming and you just had a great match, what happens next?
Well, let me take it backwards. Now, even now, and this doesn't just apply to me. People deal with it in different ways, but this applies to everybody that's on the show. Whether it's the wrestlers or the referees or the announcers, think about this in my case, just because I'm speaking personally. Like after the show, the Crockett Cup. Well, we had gotten up at, 7:30 that day because we left early because the VIP started at 11 o'clock. So we were out of the hotel at 9:30 and then we had signed autographs. We did blah, blah, blah all day, etc. But then you study for the show, get up for the show. It's 3 hours. You're calling the live as it happens. There's no stop downs except in a pre-tape where you take a sip of water or whatever. There's no redos. It's all live. And you're up and you're screaming and you're yelling. And then afterwards, everybody's, either high-fiving if it went good or, fucking post-mortem if it didn't. And then you got to get something to eat because you've been in the fucking building for 12 hours. And then you get back to the hotel. And even though you're tired, you can't just fucking go to sleep. Oh, I'm just going to lay down now. But, so now in the age of the laptop, I get on Twitter or whatever and just see what everybody thought of the show or something to look at, especially if there's nothing on television, because you have to. And this is why it's hard for me traveling, these days. Another reason, because then if you got to get up at 7 o'clock the next morning, like we used to have to do to catch flights or whatever, you're driving back, you're like, fuck, it's 3 o'clock. I didn't get back to the hotel till 2.5 hours ago, maybe. And I got to leave at 7. So you don't get a lot of sleep. When I was on the road regularly and I was younger, I could easily go back to the hotel and demolish an entire extra large Domino's pizza with a fucking couple of bags of potato chips and a big, giant soft drink of some descriptions. But before I quit caffeine, it was probably Pepsi, and watch TV. And there was always the potential that I had arranged a visit from a friend earlier in the evening, because that was excellent, a rest and recuperation period from people trying to kill you.
Shotgun.
Shoot it to me right now. Junior Walker and the All-Stars. Shotgun. It was in Misery. But anyway, but you know, a lot of guys like to go out to, I never drank on the road, went to bars. People were trying to kill me in the arena with security. I'm going to go to a fucking bar, right? But I didn't want to anyway, because I wanted to go to the hotel, get something to fucking eat and decompress and, you know, count all my extremities, make sure nobody cut a finger off or anything on the way back from the ring, and just relax, potentially have a limited amount of company. Other guys, you know, were like, oh, we want to go out and be around people. Fuck, I was just in the middle of 10,000 fucking people. And they're all screaming and throwing things at me. And you know, for baby faces, it's different. Then they idolize you. But still, it's all energy, whether it's because you're the idol of millions and you were the main event and you drew a big house and you're like, wow, and you can't just go to the fucking Holiday Inn and go to bed. Or whether it's, in our case, often we had been in a skirmish or a dust up, or somebody hit the ring or tried to grab one of us on the way back from the match, or done something in the parking lot, or we had to interact with the security or the cops or whatever, or, you know, there was a hairy thing where, boy, we might not make it out of this fucking deal. Those were especially challenging to go to sleep after. But a lot of guys, that's why they did the things that they did. And that's why I was often overweight, but with a smile on my face, because I usually did the things I did. And it required getting out of fucking public. And it still does to this day. Even if I enjoy myself immensely, John Fell can testify to this. If I enjoy myself immensely visiting with my old friends and talking to the fans and signing the autographs and doing the thing and having a fun time of deal, still after 10 hours or so of constantly being in the public and interacting with everybody, you want to go sit down, turn the fucking TV on, crank the air conditioning up, and goddamn have some fucking silence, read a new book, something like that. That's what I do.
I got to ask you.
Go ahead.
A couple things. One, when did you give up caffeine, and just how much caffeine were you drinking in the pre-Sprite Zero days? Sprite still has no caffeine, but then I got off the sugar. It was 1990, because it was right before I quit the booking committee. I think the two things went hand in hand. But yeah, the bottle Sprite, 16 ounces, 8, 10, 12 a day. Just depends. Wow.
Or what fountain drinks would be mixed in there, because we ate at fast food places, because unless it was a Baltimore trip where we went to Sabatino's or something, you know, it was just like, we got to get in and get, especially if we're driving, lunch on the way there to drive through and food on the way back. You don't get back home till 3:00 in the morning. You're going to sit down and when I lived in Charlotte, a lot of times I would be getting home and cooking cheeseburgers at 4 or 5 in the morning when the guy next to me that worked at the airport for US Air would get up and leave for work, right? He's going to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. I've just come back and I'm frying cheeseburgers. And we're both thinking, fuck, this fucking guy's life must be misery.
Well, one more thing before we go. Actually, a two-part question. One,
before we go, where are we going? We still got the rest of the fucking program.
I thought you were going over to be with the Gaddafis, but we'll talk about that later. What would Stan eat when you would stop at a fast food place? And secondly, did you say you would eat an entire extra large pie and a bag of chips?
No, a couple bags of chips. You can't make one of those vending machine bags of potato chips last through an entire extra large pizza. Fuck. You need at least 2 or 3 to have the ratio right. See, that was the thing. Like you said, oftentimes when I would get back to the hotel, either we would have had, and that is if we're going to a hotel, right? If we're driving back home, then it's some other kind of drive-through food. But if you get out of the show and you're staying over in a fucking location, you've had a long travel day, you've had a day of work, even if you had fun and had a great match and nobody fucking tried to kill you, you know, I'm like fucking decompression eating. Yeah, I'm laying in my underwear on the bed with a fucking big shower towel spread out with that pizza and with the TV remote, and I'm fucking stuffing it in my fucking face.
And what would Stan eat when you would go to a drive?
Oh, what was Stan? Stan would often get like grilled chicken or things like that. Stan wouldn't just, and if he did get a burger, he wouldn't like do the fucking triple with the extra fucking shit like me or whatever. But here's the thing. Stan was going to the gym on a regular basis, but a regular basis being a couple times a week with the schedule that we had back then. Still looked good. Had great genetics. His weight never varied. Look at a picture of fucking Stan. He's lost weight now. He's lighter than he was when he wrestled. But look at a picture of Stan Lane. Really, he was bigger, maybe about 15 or 20 pounds when he and Kern were really working out heavy in Tennessee because they had a lot of spare time. But otherwise, his body never changed. His genetics are just incredible. So he wouldn't go as far as I would. And he hated when we get gas station hot dogs, me and Bobby, or gas station sausages or shit. They just disgusted him because we'd bite into it and he'd like, look at all the gimmicks in that. There's a white piece of something and a red piece of all the gimmicks in that sausage. What the fuck? It's like the Motel Hell shit. It takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent's fritters. Anyway, real quick, but let's talk about the big fucking controversy over the past couple of days, and then we'll talk about what you're doing this week, and then we'll talk to Dutch about what he's been doing. But when is a receipt not a receipt? I teased it at the top of the program because I read this. Oh my God, wrestler Brad Anderson. I can't even remember now the way the report was written and the headline was written, but it was a shoot. Wrestler Brad Anderson viciously shoots on this wrestler and unprofessional and should be banned from the world. And I'm thinking they got in some big fucking fight, right? Some goddamn something in a match broke down and Brad just lost his head and fucking beat the piss out of him. I'm thinking this has all been built up, right? To where finally I clicked the fucking thing. And you watched it with me earlier, but I just seen the clip of him rushing this guy before. Some fucking jack off put it up on Twitter like, oh, this is heinous. And had just the clip of him rushing the guy and beating him up and dumping him on his head. But is this now where we are, that this was considered a violent, vicious shoot in pro wrestling? You saw it.
Well, it was violent. I mean, he went in there and he said, I'm going to hurt this guy. And he obviously wasn't working with him. He did go in there and intend to hurt him and hurt him.
But it wasn't a fight because the other guy couldn't do anything because I guess he couldn't fucking wrestle if his life depended on it or was scared to fucking try. Secondly,
plus overwhelmed. It happened pretty quickly.
Well, yes, but it wasn't a shoot fight. It was Brad rushed him and took him down and fucking rode him and cross-faced him. He was shoot wrestling him, but I was expecting fucking just getting a guy down and just punched him in the face until people pulled him off his ass from the way that this thing was built up on the internet. This was the most disappointing, flat popcorn fart of a fucking shoot. And everybody said, and I know Brad Anderson, I haven't seen him in years. He's gotten bigger and he shaved his head. He used to have a luxurious head of hair, but Gene Anderson's son.
That's not the Zanpanzer I remember.
The Zanpanzer. And, and I never had any issue with him, but I don't know what, but here's the thing. What apparently there is two sides to every story, as they say. What I heard, and I'm not vouching for the complete accuracy of all this, but I heard that this wrestler did an angle with Brad's son, who I guess now is either wrestling or was going to, in this local independent group, they were doing an angle, whatever, and he broke two of the kids' ribs. And Brad had to go sit in the fucking hospital with him in Charlotte and wasn't happy about that. And apparently the way the guy handled it, said whether he didn't apologize or said something smart or whatever the fuck. So he gets in the ring and he basically, in the promo, it's hard to hear because it's not a great PA system, but he basically says, I was raised in this business and taught to respect people and et cetera, et cetera. And what you're about to see is a receipt. And he rushes the guy, takes him down, cross faces him. He's gonna he's riding him a little bit. I'm sure he's doing some fucking dirty tactics in there we couldn't see because a fat photographer got in the way of the guy's camera phone.
And then the guy filming it says, get out of the way.
Yeah, the guy filming, and the guys filming it's better than the goddamn tape itself because they keep going, it's turned real now. They ought to stop this. That's turned real. But anyway, the guy tries to get out from under Brad and get out from under the ropes, and Brad kicks him and follows him out, and that front face locks him again and dumps him on his head and gets up and walks off. As shoots go, that was not even an exciting shoot, and everybody always knows that shoots are usually pretty putrid to begin with.
However, let me ask you this. 2 questions. One, if that happened on one of your shows that you were promoting, what would you do? And secondly, is he the one who should be handing out the receipt, or should it be his son that hands out the receipt?
Well, it's hard to say what I would have done on one of my shows, because I would have, hopefully somebody would have told me that there's something was going on and it would have been settled before the match got in the ring. Secondly, I've used Brad Anderson before, as I recall, and Bryant, but I don't know that I would have booked this other guy from the looks of it. So I don't know if it had been on my show or not. But no, it shouldn't have been in the ring in front of people. He should have just done it if he was going to do it. If the guy, he should give the guy a chance to apologize and explain what the fuck's going on. And then he should have just done it if he had to do it, rather than doing it in the ring in front of people. But I'm just saying.
But again, should he have done it, or is it his son's thing? I mean, at one point.
But I don't know how old his son is, because I didn't know how old Brad's not.
True. That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Is this a child's son that they were doing an angle with? Is he just training? I didn't see the first part of this fucking angle, right? So I'm not sure exactly what was going on. But
it's like having a problem with Barry Windham and then getting sucker punched by Blackjack and knocked out, which may or may not have happened to a few people. Well,
it's like having a problem with Barry Windham and then you send Kendall to settle it would be the other. No, I'm kidding. Kendall's a big boy these days. He was thin when he was younger. But anyway, no, it was built up to be like this shoot where I thought I'm going to break out and see this all-time brawl in the ring with people pulling these guys apart. And no, it was basically a guy knew how to fucking wrestle and a guy didn't know how to wrestle, and the guy who knew how to wrestle was fucking mad. But it actually, Bill Watts did more damage to the fucking fan that he tried to stretch in Shreveport one night, and he couldn't get to fucking, well, he put Doc in with him because the guy was like, I want to be a wrestler. Okay. So they put Dr. Death in with him, and Doc can't pry the guy off the ropes. He's just holding on the ropes. So finally Watts says, here, come here, work out with me for a second. Here, just get a headlock on me. I'm an old man. And Watts got the headlock on him, and he took the guy up over backwards and suplexed him, and then somehow had the guy scratching his left ear with his left hand, but the left hand was going around behind his neck first from in front. I don't know. And it was fucking, yeah. And Watts split the seam of his pants while he's trying to sugar the guy. And it was, but yeah, they're all ugly. But in this case, this was a little uglier and a letdown, a very disappointing shoot.
And unprofessional to have it in front of the fans. And
it was unprofessional. I'm not trying to, piss Brad off, obviously. But yeah, he should have, if he had to do it, if he hurt your son, that's one thing. If you had to do it, you just should have done it privately. Anyway, what are you doing privately this week, besides jacking it in San Diego?
It's all in public in San Diego or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. The Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, a big week of shows. Want to mention a few things real quick. Super Studcast number 17 is now available for patrons of Ron Fuller Studcast at patreon.com/Studcast. For only $2.99, you get in the door. You get access to all these bonus shows. And the latest one with Jimmy Golden. That's right. The Welch cousins sit down and for over 90 minutes of hilarity and history, talk about a number of things, including, I'm going to encourage everyone to hear this story. You've all heard of wet t-shirt contests. What happens when Don Kernodle goes to a wet underwear contest? Find out on the latest Super Studcast. Once again, patreon.com/Studcast. Also want to mention on Kentucky Fried Wrestling, Howard Baum and the host Scott Bowden go over this year's Cauliflower Alley Club and all the controversies that may or may not have happened. You can hear that at KFR Pod or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And a big week on Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdrin and Barry, Jeff Bowdrin and Barry Rose. Welcome Barry Horowitz onto the show. I guess maybe I should say Jack Hart, in case you're an old-time fan. He comes on the show for a very memorable and fun interview. You find out what a big fan Barry Horowitz is of professional wrestling. It's always nice to hear that wrestlers actually like wrestling. Check that out at bowdrinpod.com or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And of course, the 605 Super Podcast, the mothership. Jacking it in San Diego, baby. I want to thank everyone for the reaction to last week's show. It has quickly become one of the most popular shows we've ever done, and it is one of the greatest shows the 605 Super Podcast has ever produced. And the next show is in production right now.
Boy, you're humble. You are humble to the core.
I'm humble about everything except this because I'm the fucking best at this. Coming next week on the 605 Super Podcast, listen to this lineup, Jim. Roman Gomez will be on the show. Do you know Roman Gomez?
I don't know Roman Gomez.
Roman Gomez, a longtime Las Vegas wrestling fan who had his Dory Funk Jr. Wrestling All-Stars card defaced by Marty Funk. Get the whole story directly from the guy that it happened to. This is a memorable story. We also have someone who briefly worked for Smoky Mountain Wrestling and has a very unique place in ECW history, and that is Chad Austin. Chad Austin will be on the show to talk about various things, the famous New Jack incident, what happened, what didn't happen. And of course, he will talk about the fact that he was originally, if you go back and you watch 1994 ECW, he was originally in line for that Mikey Whipwreck push. He was originally in line for that wrestling school dropout. You may remember Paul Heyman had that in ICW. He tried to bring it back in ECW. It became Mikey Whipwreck, but Chad Austin was getting that push first. Plus, we have Scott Teal on the show to talk about the latest books that he has published with Crowbar Press. And in the works, we have giant segments on Silver King, who just unfortunately passed away in the ring, Gene Kaniski, the long-awaited Jeff Otto interview, and so much more. The 605 Super Podcast, the mothership, at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. That's all I have to say.
You tried to sneak a second one in on me, didn't you?
You know what? I didn't intentionally do it. As I was doing it, it just slipped out. It just very easily comes right out with the name of the show.
All right. Anyway, let's go to our guest.
Well, hold on just one second, Jim, because I know we have our guest ready right now, so maybe we could stop with these hijinks and we can get to our big star that is on the line.
Yes, hijinks. With no more falderall and shenanigans and hijinks. We're going to have all those with our guest. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a wrestling legend. He's been a wrestler. He's been a booker. But now he's been known around the world as the narrator of the new smash hit television program on Viceland Television. It's called Dark Side of the Ring, and he is the man who ties it all together. Ladies and gentlemen, the legend, your friend and mine, Dirty Dutch Mantell. Dutch, thank you for being back on the show.
Hey, man, I love that introduction. I mean, you could do that all day long, and I could listen to it. Yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I just heard this morning about Dark Side of the Ring. It is the most watched original programming in Vice TV history. So it's not bad, huh?
Not and only 5 episodes have, 6 episodes have aired now, because we're taping this previous to the final show, the Moolah episode, but it's aired by the time the people will hear this. But of course, it's continuing to air morning, noon, and night. It's a smash hit. If this was Broadway, folks, the searchlights would be going crazy. And part of it, Dutch, actually, I haven't even asked you this question, so I'll ask you on the air. Hopefully it'll be an interesting answer, or we're all fucked. But I knew you were going to be... I knew you were going to...
I put up on Twitter, we can fuck this thing up.
Yeah, well, we're headed in that direction. I knew you were going to be contacted and talked to about the Bruiser Brody episode, and that was the one that they first released on YouTube as a teaser, and it's what got a lot of people's attention. You were there that night, but how did it come about that you were chosen to be the narrator of the rest of the episodes in the series?
Well, of course, I was sitting around doing nothing at my house and like sticking a fork in the dog, just basically entertaining myself. And the phone rang, and it was the producer of Dark Side of the Ring, Evan Husney. Of course, he wasn't the producer then; he was just thinking about doing it. And he wanted to do a pilot episode, and he wanted to do the killing of Bruiser Brody. And he called me, and he started talking to me. Would I appear on the show? Because he had Tony Atlas, and he had me, and he had some more people, I guess. And so I was the first guy he contacted. And then when I went in there to do my part, when he wanted to ask me the questions for the show, a friendship developed, and he kind of liked me. So when that first episode they liked it, Vice liked it, and they wanted to say, well, we're going to get 5 more episodes. So he needed a narrator, because Mick Foley narrated the Bruiser Brody one.
Which actually fit perfectly. That fit perfectly because the way that Mick had looked up to Brody. So that fit there.
it was actually a great addition to the show. And so when he wanted to do the rest of them, he asked me, did I want to be the narrator? And I did, so because it was something I'd love to do. And it was something that I think wrestling fans would be interested in. And I've actually found every one of them, even though, being in the business and you hear these things firsthand. I mean, like you call a guy in Texas and say the Gino Hernandez story or even the Von Erich story. And we talk to people that are actually actively working there at the time, but still I learned things I have never heard before. Like I never heard that Gino Hernandez would fly to Miami and then drive back. I never heard that before because I heard everything else around that, but there were a lot of things that I didn't hear that I learned even narrating the show.
Well, nobody had ever seen or heard from or met in the wrestling business that I know of Gino's mother. I didn't know she was even still living until they found her. They've been able to go back and find not only the usual guys in the business, but some interesting people that, don't pop up at the conventions or do podcasts or have shoot interviews or are interviewed on a regular basis.
Well, in the Gino Hernandez one, they actually found the guy who was convicted, not for the death of Gino, but for some other stuff.
Yeah.
They actually found that guy and interviewed him, and he had served 30 years in prison. I don't know what he did, but it must have been pretty serious to serve 30 years. But they went back and found him. So they had to do some digging, and this was well researched. I will say that about Evan and his partner Jason. They researched this and they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah,
Jimmy, you did a great job. You did a great job on there too.
Well, thank you. They enjoyed coming up here because both of them are wrestling. They're fans of wrestling, but at the same time, because they weren't inside the business like you and me, and sometimes can't see the forest for the trees, they were able to tell the story to me equally as well to people who kind of already knew the story and to people who had never heard of these people before, because they were going for a mainstream audience. And these are kind of fascinating stories, regardless of whether you're a wrestling fan or not. It's just that, it's so good for wrestling fans.
I was going to say the same thing. You didn't have to be a wrestling fan to enjoy and appreciate these stories. It's like if you watch Dateline, you don't know who these people are you're talking about, but they tell it so well that you kind of, by the time the show's over, you kind of know that person.
Yeah.
So, and talking about Gino, I met him when I was probably about 10 years before he died. I met him in Florida, and he was just starting out. He was greener than grass, but I could tell the kid was going to be good-looking kid. He was about 210 then, maybe 205. And I could tell that, and he told me, he said, I'm just here just to get some seasoning, and I'm gonna go back to Texas, and I'm gonna start working there. And I said, well, good. And he was very, very good in the ring. I worked with him about 3 or 4 times a week while he was there then.
Yeah, I think it was going to be
he was going to be a good hand.
I think it was like 78 or 79. They also, when he was 18 years old, because 18 or 19, they made mention that he was a teenage sensation. He got to work Detroit, and that was, and of course, in 78, 79, that wasn't a, huge compliment to be able to work Detroit because business was down, but they brought him in and used him. Well, I mean, for all intents and purposes, by the late 70s, Detroit was hurting. But they brought him in and used him against the Sheik as a teenage sensation babyface, Gino Hernandez, because I saw him on television at the time, and I was wondering, you could tell he knew what he was doing, but he was painfully thin and very young, and suddenly he's on top in a territory like Detroit. But you wouldn't have expected that he would grow into the Gino that he became. I guess he was good for a young kid, but he was still a baby face and, not gorgeous Gino.
Jimmy, did you ever work Detroit?
Not the action. I've worked in Detroit, but only for Crockett or Vince. I never actually worked Detroit.
I mean, you never worked the territory, right?
No, unfortunately, no. That was gone by the time I came around.
Well, it was still there, and I was around, and I still didn't want to make that place. I'd heard so many goddamn stories about Detroit. You couldn't have melted and poured me in Detroit. Shit. And there was a few other places that I just wouldn't go. Like
that was
Calgary,
that was the thing at the end of the 70s. Detroit kind of, because the Sheik's territory we've talked about on the program had aged out to where it was kind of brutal, and the crowds were down, and Detroit's economy was starting to suffer and everything, where it had been the hottest city in the country, 10 years beforehand, right? But Detroit then was like Kansas City became in like 85. Like the Monogram Studios, Poverty Row of wrestling territories. It was brutal.
Well, I made a mistake one time. I did book myself in Kansas City. Why, I don't know. I lasted, I swear, I think I went out there and I lasted like 6 weeks. I said, screw this. And, when you go in a place, you're only going to last 6 weeks. It wasn't a good idea to begin with. So, but I did get to see it.
Is that when you became one of the Kansas Jayhawks?
Well, no, I became that was Dusty's idea, the Kansas Jayhawks.
What was it like being partners with Bobby Jaggers?
Oh, it was interesting, I tell you that. Bobby was a lot of things, but one thing he wasn't was fucking boring. He wasn't boring. He had stories, and a lot of people said, well, everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. I don't care. Because
it was entertaining.
He told interesting lies. So, and he was a good talker, kind of knew what he was talking about. He told Tully Blanchard one day that he could ski. And Tully said, bullshit, big fat bastard, you can't ski. Yeah, I can. He said, well, and they went up on the lake in Charlotte one day. And they all had the boat out there. I think Magnum was out there and Tully and who else. But Jaggers was there for what ungodly reason, I don't know. They said, hey, fat boy, let's see if you can ski. And they threw the skis in the water, and he got back there, and he put them on, and they took off, and guess what? Bobby wasn't a bad skier.
No!
Yeah. Even Tully said, he said that fat sumbitch could actually ski. He said, I couldn't believe it. Because everything else he said was a bunch of bullshit. And then he took off, whatever. I never tried skiing. I think I tried it one time and got yanked out of I got yanked out of it already. I didn't know what I was doing. He said Bobby got up on the ski and he actually one time he lifted one ski and he was skiing on one leg. I don't know.
Oh my God. He told the Midnight Express and I one night, he told a story. I think it was, we were on Crockett's plane. And so we're trapped there, right? It is a series of stories coming from Jaggers, and they're playing cards too. And Jaggers, besides the fact that he was once nearly married Ann Wilson of Heart, nearly. Another one was that he had this brand new sports car. It was a Corvette or whatever, and he was going 150 miles an hour, and he lost control and started flipping end over end, and a big wreck. And when he woke up on the interstate, he was still strapped into the driver's seat and sitting right on the driver's seat on the interstate itself. The car had completely broken up around him, but he still had a hold of the steering wheel, just a loose steering wheel, and he's in the chair, still strapped in, but with no car around him. But he was all right.
But interesting story.
Yes, but it was, so you couldn't really get mad at him lying to you because it was interesting along with it. Anyway, Kansas City, you got booked in there, lasted for 6 weeks, and that's where you became a Kansas Jayhawk.
No, I was there with Ron Bass. And you didn't know this, but I was a Bass brother one time too.
No, I do remember. Dutch Bass. I included that with Gallagher and Wayne Cowan on your Christmas card one time.
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense. Dutch Bass. What a stupid name. Didn't even sound right. And I guess Ron took me down there, God rest his soul, but he tried to tell me some of the history of the Basses. Hell, I couldn't keep them straight. Ron and Don and Ma and all this. I went, what the hell is going on here?
Did you get to work with Ma, or was Ma still part of it?
No. I never met her. I just heard her name.
Oh, that was. I got to see Ron and Don Bass when Phil Golden ran All-Star Wrestling opposition to Jarrett up here in 72, 73. And Ma Bass was their manager. And Mae Weston, who was a girl wrestler from the days of Mildred Burke in the 40s and et cetera. And Don used to tell me stories that she had so much heat, she got them shot at. And she had that purse that really had a brick in it and also sometimes had a pistol in it that she would hit the fans over the head with and shit. And she was tougher than the fucking men were.
No shit. See, when you tell people today how mad people actually used to get at the wrestlers, at the heels, they kind of look at you like, you get the fuck out of here. And Harlan, Kentucky, and I wasn't there, but I've always heard this story. One guy was sitting and they ran in a gym there. He shot a gun. He was on like the top row of the bleachers. He shot a gun in the middle of the ring. You ever hear that story?
Yeah, well, actually, it was the opposite direction because he was shooting at Ron Wright. He was on the floor, but he shot at Ron Wright, and they dug the bullet. He missed Ron Wright. They dug the bullets out of the top of the building. It was at Kaywood High School in Harlan. The bullets went and lodged in the top of the building about a foot over because the people were sitting up to the top of the bleachers, the general admission section, right? About a foot over those people's heads is where they dug the bullets out of the top of the fucking wall. He missed those people in the top row of the bleachers by a foot trying to shoot up into the ring at Ron Wright.
And like if you tell people like all the fights I used to have in Puerto Rico just getting back from the ring, they just don't believe it. Like the kids starting out today in wrestling, they've never seen real heat, and they don't know what it's like. And I guarantee you, if they ever did see it, they might not like it.
Well,
it's kind of dangerous.
I miss it in a way because I miss it because it was like we all made a lot of money and it was more fun back then to have that level of participation and emotion from the audience when they could be controlled. But conversely, there's not the same level of cheer either. It's hard for people, like you said, that haven't seen it to understand, but they hated us. Like, imagine if you're in a bar or a restaurant somewhere and one guy gets as mad at you as anybody's ever been mad at you before, and you guys are about to fight. Multiply that by hundreds, if not thousands of people, and you can feel that shit, right? But at the same time, they cheer the baby faces now because they're supposed to, and they may like them and etc. But it's not like, oh my God, we have found God and it's the Rock and Roll Express, or oh my God, Dusty Rhodes, I will throw my baby out the window to rescue Dusty Rhodes. There was that level of love also, and you don't feel that anymore either. When people get that emotional in large groups, you can feel it in the air. It's a fucking thing you can feel, and you get it, and you don't get it now.
It's almost like a lynching crowd. You can feel that hate.
Yeah.
When they come up there to yank your ass out of that jail. Yeah, it is a different story, and it is a different world. But back in those days, we didn't. But today you cannot get that level of heat, what we call heat, anymore. First of all, TV stations don't want it. Social media won't let you have it, and they really don't need it anymore anyway because of the TV contracts and all that. So they want to keep it just as general as they can and keep moving along and making money.
Hey, I want to talk to you about some stuff that you have uncovered because our listeners enjoy great classic one-of-a-kind wrestling memorabilia. But I want to ask you one thing real quick first, something that Brian and I were talking about before we brought you on the air. And I don't know if have you heard that Brad Anderson was in a shoot?
I saw that.
Did you see the clip? Okay, here, before you give your opinion, let me tell you what mine is, because that way we haven't rehearsed this beforehand. But I was let down because I saw these headlines: a vicious, heinous shoot breaks out and takes place. And I didn't know what I was thinking. I was going to see this guy's bones broken, or I was going to see these two guys in the middle of a match. Somehow something goes wrong and they have a hell of a fight and they're swinging and people are pulling them apart. I didn't expect that. Was a blasé shoot to me.
Yeah.
Was that possibly one of the, because shoots in the business are usually a letdown, but was to it was unprofessional. We mentioned he should have done it in the locker room if he wanted to do it that bad to the guy, instead of doing it in front of people. But what did you think now?
I know nothing about it, but I heard they had done somewhat of an angle or something. But when I saw it, he went over there and slapped the kid, and the kid's greener than shit. The only thing I saw that was really, really dangerous is when he tried to suplex him on the floor.
Yeah.
And the kid laid down on him, and he actually put him down on his head. I mean, he could have broke his neck, but it was unprofessional. And even though if they want to try to pass it off as a work shoot, usually a work shoot, the guy fights back. This kid never fought back.
Well, no, it wasn't a work, but also apparently the angle was beforehand was that the guy had broken Brad's son's ribs, but apparently he really broke his ribs, and that part wasn't an angle, as is what we're hearing now. Okay. But that brings to mind a bigger question I was going to ask you is, have you ever seen the guys get in an entertaining shoot? Or is it always fucking blasé? I mean, not maybe as blasé as that, but it's bleh.
Well, I've seen some dressing room shoots that were pretty fucking interesting.
There you could tell a couple of those. I was talking about in the ring, but we'll extend things to the locker room.
Well, let me see what
You've been in a couple. That my favorite one is in one of your books.
Is what now?
Is in one of your books, the one where you walked the dog on Roberto Soto. I'll never forget that phrase. I walked the dog on Mr. Soto with that stick.
I beat the fuck out of him. I'll tell you what happened there. And for those who haven't heard the story, it's in. I've written 2 books. You can still get them from me, and I'll autograph them at dirtydutchmantell@gmail.com if you want a book. But I'm in Savannah, Georgia, and I had been this was like my second year in the business. And I'm going to tell you how stupid I was, Jimmy. When I got in this business, I thought I knew about the business. I walked around for 3 weeks thinking Abdullah the Butcher was really from the Sudan. Because he never spoke in the dressing room. He would just look at me and, you ever see the movie that your team was named after, Midnight Express? You remember that movie?
Yes.
Remember the big guy that looked like Abdullah in it? That's who I thought he resembled. He's scared to live in shit. Abdullah's scared to live in shit out of me. So anyway, I'm in Savannah one night, and I go in the ring with Roberto Soto and Ronnie West. I don't know if anybody remembers him, but Ronnie West was a referee. And Soto and Ronnie were buddies, but they were kind of playing around in the ring at my expense. So I take down Soto in a back chin lock, but he reaches up with his left hand and he grabs my hair and he starts pulling, but he's pulling pretty hard. And then Ronnie said, stop it. And then Ronnie gets to pulling pretty hard. And finally I get tired of it. And I said, stop pulling my fucking hair, goddammit. And he kicked out of that and he come up and all of a sudden he hit me right in the left eye as hard as he could with the right hand. And I know what he was mad about because when he had just come back to the territory. And when he left, he was like the Georgia champion. But when he came back, now he's down his second match with me, and he didn't like it. So he's going to take it out on me. So he hit me one time hard in the eye, and I could feel the blood coming down. And this is one thing I've always noticed about wrestling fans. They can be wild and up and cheering, but when that happened, the place went, you could hear a pin drop. When he hit me, bam, because people could tell it's real. And they didn't much like that. And to tell the truth, I didn't give a fuck for it myself either.
It wasn't everybody's favorite.
So I still try to work the match, and I work him. I said, all right, man, come on, let's work. And he pushes me away and hits me again. Same spot. Okay. I've learned my lesson. I roll out of the ring. I tell Ronnie, count me out. I just go back to the dressing room. And the place is quiet very quiet. Nobody, none of the fans even, they just looked at me. It was kind of weird and eerie when you go back and nobody's saying nothing. They're saying, was that a shoot? Well, he could have convinced me it was. So I went back to the dressing room, and I remember Abdullah still brings this up today. Abdullah looked at me and said, "This is when I finally started talking to him." So he said, "What was that about?" And I told Abdullah, I said, "I don't think I remembered asking you a goddamn thing." But I was mad. I wasn't mad at Abdullah. But I was just I was wanted to get Soto. I go to the janitor closet, open the door. There's like a dust mop handle, and I broke it over my knee. Well, you've been in Savannah, in the old building. You know that you can go through the back without going out on the floor.
Yeah,
so I went to the kitchen in the back, the other dressing room, and I kicked open the door. And there's Soto. Everybody's kind of quiet in there, too. And he saw me. He said, "Hey, Chinga, do laundry." That's how I learned my Spanish. You learn the bad words first. And Chinga is like mother effer, you know. So.
Yeah.
So when he come, I guess he never saw the handle I had. And I walked the dog with him. I put 16 stitches in his head, took him down, you know, and I had him up against the locker, and I'm trying to punch him. And I looked down, and there's a big puddle of blood down there. And I thought it was my blood. I thought he'd cut me or something, you know. But it wasn't, because it was the blood from where I'd hit him in the head. Now, I wish I hadn't have done that. But, you know, when things like that happen in the ring, unless you defend yourself and you make a stand, you become a target. And I didn't much want to be a target. And I was telling somebody, I said, if I did that same thing today, they'd fire me. But back in those days, if you didn't do it, they would fire you because they would lose respect for you. I would have been better off going over there and getting the shit beat out of me again than to do nothing.
Yeah.
So, but guess what? Soto never bothered me again. So,
hey, who was booking at that point in time? Was it Ole?
Tom Ernesto.
I'm just thinking, can you imagine going to any of the old time bookers and go, "Hey, this is an unsafe work environment"?
No, I cannot. They'd say, "Get the fuck out of here." They'd probably fire you on the spot if you said something like that. Did Shawn Michaels, did he say that about Brett?
Yeah, that was after they had the fight in the bathroom. I was there when he came in and threw the hair down. This is an unsafe work environment. I always thought he's obviously researched that particular phrase. No, because who comes up with that? That's never been. No. This is not a corporate company at that point in time. There's a human resources department. I don't know if any of them ever talked to the wrestlers or not. Nobody says shit like that. Nobody ever thought of suing for unsafe work. So somebody had told him that phrase, and he was saving it to drop it probably when the next person that fucking punched him in the mouth in the locker room, because there was so many of them. When I heard you say he threw the hair down, and I forgot how you described it. I said it looked like a small possum.
I know. When I heard that, I had to laugh. So that's my shoot story for the day.
Well, hey, you've got, we were talking a few days ago, which instigated this program today and the tremendous success of Dark Side of the Ring that we can't mention enough. But you've been going through some of your stuff, because we do collectibles here on the program. Usually they're mine or about me or something to do with me. But in this case, enough talking about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? You've been going through your old files, and you said to me, "Do you think anybody's interested in this stuff?" I said, "My God, this one of a kind booking books and ring worn stuff that you have accumulated over your career." And yes, people are interested because these collector's items are bigger than ever. So we wanted to do a little American Pickers today, Dirty Dutch version, and tell us about some of this stuff you've found and that you're thinking about parting with if the offer is proper.
Well, I did this about 10 years ago, maybe 12, maybe 8. I'm sorry, let me come back this way. But, and I knew nothing about it. But I had several whips, I had 4 or 5 whips that actually whipped a lot of people. And when I put them up, people, they wanted them, and I got rid of them. And my ponchos, and I sold some hats, and I sold a pair of boots. So most of my collectible stuff I've kind of already moved, which surprised me. But you told me, you said people will want this stuff, and I'm thinking, bullshit, they're not going. And that's the old saying: one man's trash is another man's treasure. So, but anyway, I was going through my stuff the other day. and I found my old book from Puerto Rico that I used as a booking book. And I'm looking at it, and it's, it has all the dates in it and the cards and some numbers and this, that, and the other, but it's kind of a full book. And part of that book is when I was finishing up with you, Jimmy.
Oh, really?
94. Yeah, because I think I made 2 TVs. One was Chilhowie, Virginia, I saw.
Yeah.
And the other was somewhere else. I forgot, another Virginia town. But, and I was just finishing up, doing the commentary for you at Smoky Mountain. And then I went to Puerto Rico. And then I put it up, and it's already gone now. I put it up, and it was gone in like a day. So a guy made a.
Oh, hell. Well, that's because we only talked 2 days ago. So, yeah.
No, it's already gone. I actually mailed it off this morning. So anyway, this other thing, this is what I'm thinking about putting up too. You remember the old vest I wore as Zeb Coulter, and it had had the snake on the back, "Don't tread on me."
Oh, yeah, and it kind of like a leather type of vest.
Well, I wore several, but the one that I wore the most had "Don't tread on me." And if anybody wants to make an offer on that one, here's my email address, dirtydutchmantell@gmail.com, and just call me up and make an offer. If I get it on, so you're going to get the people that are listening today, Jimmy, they're going to get first dibs on this stuff.
Well, yeah, this is an exclusive.
When does this drop?
This drops, and sometimes it drops like a turd, but it drops on Thursday. So to basically tomorrow, as we're speaking here now, it drops on Thursday, and they'll hear it all weekend. And the cult of Cornette listeners get first crack at Dirty Dutch Mantell's treasure trove of remaining memorabilia and items. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I have another partial book. It's from I think 1984. When I was in Memphis. Now, it wasn't a booking book. That was just a book. I just,
This is just your individual road book. But that's fascinating. And here's another thing. I don't even know if the wrestlers do this anymore. But everybody that knew what they were doing in the wrestling business kept a book. You get your daily planner at any office supply store or whatever with a page for every day of the year, and that's where you wrote down what town you were booked in and what your match was and what you later on maybe what your payoff was or what your expenses were. Everybody kept their book different, but that was your life. That was your road Bible there. And it shows the different places in the territory that they ran and et cetera.
See, actually in those days, that was the wrestler's phone. That's where his numbers were.
Yeah.
That's where his addresses were. That's where he would go to get his information that he would need that normally you keep in your phone today. Okay, Jimmy, remember I told you I had this thing the other day that you've never even seen.
What? Wait,
remember
what?
That? Remember I told you I had this thing that I have never seen before, and I don't even know how I got it.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
The limited edition garment.
Very limited, because you never even heard of it.
I did not know they made it.
It is. Have you ever seen, and I'm sure you have, you're a football fan, you ever seen the guys on the sideline in an NFL game, and it's raining and it's cold, and they throw these cloaks over their head? It's got a hood, and it's got the back, but I have one that says, on the back, it says WWE. It's never been worn. It's never been used. And I actually called the guy. His guy's name is Derek in WWE, and he's like the merchandise manager. And he says that was I think made one time, and it was made for WrestleMania 29 in New Jersey, and only about 20 were made. He said 20. And the reason I got it, I don't even know how I got it, just being lucky.
You got it in your swag bag, because they gave everybody. They gave me one down at the Hall of Fame thing. You get a swag bag, whether it's a T-shirt or a hoodie or the program or a duffel bag or whatever, and you got one of those in your swag bag. You lucky swag.
Well, I think it came in a WWE, like a tote bag, like a workout bag.
Yeah.
It came in that, and that's the only way I know that I could have ended up with it. But if anybody has any desires to get this piece of merchandise, because according to the merchandise manager, very limited set or number were made. He said like 20 or so, and they never were made again. I don't even know what the purpose of it was, to tell you the truth. It's actually almost too big for, I guess, probably Brock Lesnar can wear it, because it's for a big person. It's got to be for a big person. It's huge.
Well, but it covers you up from the inclement weather that way. And so here's the thing. Well, I know that there's a member of there's a member of the cult of Cornette out there that has a big kid playing high school or college football that would want them to look cool when they were on the sidelines, or warm as the case may be, on the sidelines, huddled up in that WWE football player's cape.
Well, it's got WWE right on the back of it, so if anybody wants to see it, make a bet on it. Because it's doing me no good at all. If I don't wear it,
because you don't play football.
I don't play football, but I wouldn't even use it anyway. But it's for those that do, or just to own it, just for the sake of owning it. I know collectors probably compete with each other, but I'm not a collector. So if anybody was interested in that, let me know. And and I go through this stuff. I got a bunch of books. Let me tell you what else I got. Jimmy, you remember getting when in WWF when they used to give you your tax returns?
Yes.
And all those states you worked in?
Yes.
And that long, it just kept going and going and going and going. And it was all connected. Do you still have any of those?
Well, as a matter of fact, they say that, when your tax records you should save for 7 years, right? Well, I've gone a little bit beyond that. I believe I have all my tax records since I've ever been in the wrestling business, but they're in giant boxes of paperwork in my west attic. So I still have pretty much everything. Yes.
Well, I pulled out one of those the other day, and I went, my God, that would be, taxes. I'm not mathematically inclined at all. But when I saw that, I went, I don't even want to see that. I mean, that's not for sale. I just happened to pull it out.
Oh, well,
I have a few more.
That state business, I'll say real quick, that state business is what got a lot of guys in trouble, because they didn't know, and I wouldn't have known when I first started having to do it, except I had an accountant doing my shit. But when we worked for Crockett in the 80s, when they expanded, and then later on for Vince in the early 90s, when you worked regularly, you sometimes had to file a state income tax return in like 12 or 13 different states.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. And
because it would just go ahead.
Well, it was a pain in the end. They gave you all those individual different printouts and statements and et cetera, and turned you, basically the office narked you narked on you to the government. Here's what we paid him, and then let you figure out, well, what the fuck? I got to pay 13 different states and the country.
Well, it's like NFL football players today, when they play in California, like Tom Brady, I think when he played in the Super Bowl, I forgot where the Super Bowl was, but I think it was I don't know where it was. But anybody that plays a Super Bowl in California, about 40% of that paycheck goes to the state or something, I heard. It's a big payoff. So it might be more financially rewarding not to make the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we couldn't afford to show up for the Super Bowl.
And the state is going to take half your fucking money. Screw it. I'd say I'm not that interested in going.
Folks, we're talking
about something.
We're talking about one of a kind wrestling items with the inimitable Dutch Mantell, whose email is dirtydutchmantell@gmail.com if you want to get in on the ground floor of any of these highly prized items.
Jimmy, let me tell you something else I'm going to do. The 2nd of June, I'm going to do an evening with Dutch here at the Springwater Supper Club. And you know where Centennial Park is, Jerry? You know where Centennial Park is in Nashville?
Yes. That's a nice area from what I remember.
Yeah, it is a nice area. It's the oldest bar in Tennessee. So I'm going to do an evening with Dutch right there, and it's on June the 2nd, and it'll start at 7:30, and you can get your tickets. I think the Springwater Supper Club has them on sale right now, and it's limited seating. It only gets about 150 people in there. Those little bars, they're not big coliseums, but I like it better that way because I'm going to do my bullshit on stage. I'm going to tell some wrestling stories. We're going to drink a few beers. We're going to have a good time, and it's one night only, June the 2nd, right here in Nashville. And on June the 9th, I'm going to take it to Memphis, and I'm going to do the same thing down there, and I think it's the High Tone Supper Club there. But if you follow me on Twitter, you'll find out all about it. Dirty D Mantell at Twitter, and you can find out exactly what I'm going to be and what I'm going to be doing.
And I'm mad because I would be there June the 2nd in Nashville, but I'm coming back from Milwaukee on that day, or Waukesha, as the case may be. But I'm with you in spirit. Waukesha is a suburb of Milwaukee, where the Fine Arena is located at. But
Milwaukee's in Wisconsin.
The last time I checked, it was still there. I'm not sure. They were having an election, and one of the referendums was whether they should move Milwaukee over. I'm not sure what happened. I think it's going to be there till the end of the year. It's grandfathered in to the state, but anyway.
I was never a big fan of Wisconsin. It's a nice state. I was just never a big fan of that state. Really, it gets too cold in the friggin' winter for me. And, we're talking about territories we would like to go to. You know where else I didn't want to go to?
Where?
Calgary. I've heard stories about Calgary that I wasn't even there, and it even chilled me. Like you go on the road, like you leave on a Monday, and you don't come back to the next Sunday. And that's every week. And I went, what the hell? You on the road all that time? Yep, you just start out. Two bands start out. One was the good guys, one guys was the bad guys, I guess. And you drive that whole territory, and then you come back in, you do the big show in Calgary and do TV, and then you go back out on the road. I couldn't live like that. I just couldn't do it.
Well, from managing Owen and of course Danny Davis spent a couple of tours up in Calgary for a while, and some other guys. Whether it was the extreme cold people who live there, I assume think it's normal or it doesn't bother them that bad or whatever. But to anybody else that's never experienced that, holy shit. And then the ice covered roads and the 500 and 600 mile trips, you can look at it on the Atlas and go, my God, you expect to see a dog sled and one of those, Yukon rescue teams out in places like this. The wrestling was hard enough without the travel, which I'm like you. I don't think I could have done that either. With that weather half the year in that isolated area, I think that would have been too much for me.
Stu Hart heard about me from somebody. I wish I remember now so I could go and beat the fuck out of him. He mentioned my name. But he called me up one day, and out of the blue, hey, that Stu Hart. And I've always heard him talk like that. And I heard he was a good guy. And he was very, very nice. And he wanted me to come to Calgary. And I told him as nice as I could, Mr. Hart, I'm happy where I am. I just want to stay here. And, if you ever get a happy ass, give me a call. I said, I don't think a hair is going to get that far up my ass. I'm going to end up calling Stu Hart.
Hey,
God
you know what?
He's gone, but I heard a lot of stories about him. And I could just have, I heard so much about the dungeon. And I could just see myself up there getting tricked into going down that dungeon. And
let me show you this hole. Just give me your arm, kid, and it'll be. And everybody in wrestling practice of that era and has been around him does a Stu Hart. But do you know the first person I ever heard imitate Stu Hart? Bobby Fulton. Bobby Fulton of the Fantastics, before he was fantastic, when he was just mediocre and he was underneath in Memphis. He's riding with my mom and I to Evansville when his car broke down one time. And he had been to Calgary already. It was, because he started when he was fucking 8 in the business, right? He'd been to Calgary. And he was talking about the promoter. And this was before I'd heard of Bret Hart. This was right at the start of the VCR era. So I really had just really heard about or seen a little Stampede Wrestling, didn't really know the whole story at that point. I'm a teenager myself. The point is, I have no preconceived notions of Stu Hart, but Bobby's impression when he said, like you call him to get booked, send some pictures, kid, and we'll take it. Bobby had it fucking nailed because he'd been around him. He'd been there at one of the breakfasts where, Stu wanted to cook breakfast for everybody, and they got a million cats in the house. And while he's flipping the eggs with the spatula, he gets the cat shit and scoops it off the counter and throws it away. And he goes back to flipping the eggs and all these stories. And I'm thinking Bobby Fulton is story. Well, it came probably from Bobby Fulton, but I'm thinking he's pulling my leg. This guy can't actually exist. And son of a gun, wouldn't you know who won the pony? When I find out more about it and start meeting the Harts and actually then meet Stu Hart, he sounded exactly like him. All these stories and more are true. When you find out more about the Hart family, it's like this was the easy shit to believe now. He was amazing people. But Bobby Fulton, 40 years ago, is the first one I ever heard do Stu Hart. And thankfully, it gave me one of my best stories because without it, Danny wouldn't have clicked some kind of whore.
Yeah, Danny used to tell me about Stu Hart. Here's my Owen Hart story. I'm working with him in WCW. I think, I don't know. We were in I think Montgomery, Alabama, and it was me and Moondog Rex,
Randy Colley
against Owen and somebody. And Owen wanted to do a cross body block from the top of the turnbuckle to me on the floor. And I went, he said, no, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. I said, no, Owen, you can do it. You can do it. But when you come off that top rope, I'd highly advise you to hook a parachute on your ass because I am not going to be there. And then Randy said, I'll do it, Owen. And Owen just wanted to do his cross body block. So Randy did it, and guess what happened? Broke 2 ribs, and he didn't work for a month.
Oh, and Randy, it was about 290 at the time, right?
Oh, he was about 300 probably.
Yeah.
But Owen Hart wanted to dive off on me. Hell, fucking. I didn't take any unnecessary bumps that I didn't have to take because, if you get hurt, they didn't pay you. If you got hurt, you just shit out of luck.
I'm trying to think. You had a main event career for 20 years, successful in a number of different places, booked Memphis, booked Puerto Rico, little book in Florida there, thrown in there, worked in all those territories as a main event guy, plus others. I'm trying to think of seeing you coming off the top rope one time, and I can't.
No. That wasn't mine. I didn't even like to jump down one step, Dave. even going up the walkway to get to the ring, I didn't even want to jump off that damn, the third step. Screw it, I'll take on the second, because some guys are like low flyers. I was a real low flyer. So,
well, in all seriousness, you know what? No, I'll tell you what. I saw you throw a drop kick and a finish one time because I have a picture of it. It was you and Austin Idol, and the babyface moved and you drop kicked Idol, but you only hit him with 1 foot.
Yeah, it was a one. I don't know why. I just couldn't get that second foot out there. I couldn't get it together. But it was like a 1-footed drop kick. It was only half as effective. But in all seriousness, let me say this, and you could probably what I'm saying. I've said it before on a program, just because you can cut your own ear off doesn't mean you're Van Gogh, and just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And for Dutch Mantell, that was a main event babyface and a kick-ass guy, that you were different than Lawler and Dundee and the other Memphis babyfaces, and that the guys liked you even more because you were a kick-ass guy and had the whip and fucking no bullshit, right? It didn't look That's what
right.
I try to do.
Well, but when you had that barbed wire match with Lawler, and we used to give it to the OVW guys, study body language, and it was a fucking 5-star match, as they say, and what a fight, and people were going crazy. It didn't look right for Dutch Mantell, the way that the fans took him, the way that he was presented to the fans, the way that you did your thing. It didn't look right for you to jump off the top rope. That was not a thing that we would expect you to do, nor did we give a shit if you did it. You did the high-flying elbow drop, and you did a lot of great shit in the ring, and you took bumps, and you fucking fought and threw a hell of a punch. But coming off the top rope was just not something that, due to your presentation, it wouldn't have mattered if you did. So there's no reason to do it.
You're talking about punching. I think the best punchers in the business was me and Lawler, and I watched you throw a hell of a punch. I'm watching me and Lawler's match, and it looks like we're knocking the shit out of each other. And half the time I did kind of get a little heavy on Lawler because he never said anything. But Lawler was so good, he would throw those punches, and it was so right. Did you ever see the time? I'm sure you have. Jerry Lawler. It was in that Texas Death match we had that went an hour and 15 minutes.
Yes, the Lawler and Buddy Landell with the 116 punches or whatever in 27 seconds. That was amazing. Yeah.
And we went 26 falls. And somebody was asking me about it, and when I first heard about it, a Texas Death Match tag team. At the time, I had never seen a Texas Death Match tag team match before. I never saw one. And I said, well, how does this work? He said, well, it just works like just two guys. I said, okay. That's all the instruction we got. So we went out there, and we were supposed to go, I think, 7 falls. And that was it. So the people were buying it so much. Well, we went. Lawler said, let's keep going. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Went 10 falls. Went 10 falls. The people are going fucking crazy. All right. And now we started enjoying it. So we went now 12 falls, 13 falls. Now it kind of dawned on us, well, hey, we could end this whenever we want to. I said, how long you want to go, Lawler? Lawler said, let's go till we get tired. I said, okay, let's go till we get tired. And we went 26 falls, an hour and 15 minutes. And when the people left that building that night, they said, damn, we saw something a hell of a lot different tonight than we usually see. See, they weren't used in Memphis to hour matches. They weren't used to that.
Definitely.
So when you put 4 guys in there, and I thought a great finish too. I thought. I think the people when they left Memphis, they always left saying, I fucking enjoyed the hell out of that, and I'll be back next week. And that's the way you want people leaving an event. You want them to leave not mad and pissed off. You want them thinking that, damn, I enjoyed myself, and I'll come back.
Yeah. Well, I
never call wrestling fans. I never call them marks. I call them customers, because that's exactly what they are. Because they dictate what you can do and what they'll pay for.
Yeah. And the old thing, the heel has to get heat to get mad at him, come back and see the babyface win. Yes, sometimes they left. Sometimes they left mad, but they left mad in an entertained way. It was like, it wasn't a shitty match and then they fucked us. It was like, it was this great thing and oh shit, But that's
they didn't leave. When I booked Puerto Rico, Jimmy, I beat my heels. I swear to God, I beat them like drums. Because for the people that bought the ticket, they would leave knowing that, well, the good guy really won, but not for and every night, especially TV night, I would do something at the end that would be the trailer for next week. And when that match rang from that last match, people didn't leave because I educated them. Wait a minute. Here it comes. Wait for it. Then all of a sudden, here comes the trailer. I'd run a bunch of heels in, beat shit out of the babyface. And I did that for 3 years. And they never really, it kept working, so I kept doing it. I mean, if you know your audience and what they'll buy and how they're going to react, that's half the battle.
Yeah, well, it was like
going to Puerto Rico. When I was booking Puerto Rico, Jimmy, I'd go in there, and it's supposed to start at 8:30, which in Puerto Rican time is like 9:17. I mean, they start when they fucking feel like it. So I would go in there, and I'd get there about 7 o'clock, and I'd walk in, and I'd walk up to the pina colada stand. I'd get me 2 pina coladas, and I'd get me 2 beers, Then I would drink those, and then I would go out, and the people would already be lined up to come in, and I would just feel the vibe in the building, and then I'd go in there and book the show. I actually made half of it up after I got there. Eddie Gilbert was down there with me one time. We laying around the pool, and it's like 4 o'clock. And he went, Dutch, and you know, Eddie was a big planner. He'd like to plan things. Well, I'm not a big planner. I'm really like Lawler. I just kind of make shit up as I go when I get there, which is what I did that night. Eddie said, Dutch, what are we going to do tonight? I said, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. He said, well, it's 4 o'clock. When are you going to start thinking about it? I said, about 7 o'clock if I get over there. What? You hadn't thought about it? I said, no, but don't worry, Eddie. I got it. Just let's go over there. And we went over there, and he came off like a charm, because, and you probably had the same thing in Smoky Mountain, Jimmy, because you knew your audience.
Well, the thing was, I had the card. I had, like, especially for the spot shows, I had the card, and I knew that on spot shows, most time baby faces are going over, unless it's just a mismatch, and it would be ridiculous. But I would think either in the car on the way to the town, or once I got there, about the specific finishes, or just send Hildebrand over a lot of times, because all you guys knew what you were doing. So I just slip him over, give me 12 minutes, whatever. That, unless it was Knoxville or Johnson City or television or one of the major events, then of course I'd go into great detail. But you mentioned Eddie, and Eddie being a planner, but when Texas death matches in Tennessee. When I came back after I'd quit WCW, I came up to visit for Thanksgiving of 90. And I had been talking to Eddie Gilbert because Eddie was booking Memphis then. And I said, well, Eddie, I'm going to come down to the Gardens when I'm in town that week and visit, and we'll talk about doing something, because that's when we were going to come in with the Fabs and do the thing with Lawler. And he said, okay, well, I'm watching TV Saturday morning, the Channel 3 show here in Louisville at my mom's house. And it says, and Tuesday night, the main event, Eddie Gilbert with Sam Lowe in his corner. Remember, Sam became Eddie's manager because he was his friend from Jackson, against Jeff Jarrett. And in his corner, Jim Cornette. I'm like, what the fuck? So I actually went out. That was the following Tuesday, right? I went out and bought a fucking suit because I didn't bring a suit, right? So I went out and bought some clothes. And I get there, and it's a Texas death match, and Eddie's the booker. And he says, and Jeff was green then, so he's leading. He says, we're going to go 5 or 6 falls, and then Sam will do something, and you get in and nail him. Okay, because it was loose, like Memphis, or like Tennessee always was. There's, it wasn't structured. You just went out and felt it. Well, around the 5th or 6th fall, Sam did something, and I got in and fucking nailed him. And I'm looking down at Eddie as I nail Sam, and Eddie says, not yet. What's he just so? Sam takes a bump out on the floor. I get back out. Eddie wanted to go another couple falls with Jeff, but he'd had Sam do something, and he forgot. Oh, shit, that's Cornette's cue. So I'm in the ring. I just knocked him out again then later on. But the people loved it because it looked more like a struggle because it wasn't so smooth.
Well, sometimes we just make this stuff up at spur of the moment. Let me ask you this, Jimmy. Were you there that night? It was me and Lawler and David Schultz, the doctor, against the Indian guys.
Danny Little Bear, Chief Thundercloud. And,
were you there?
The drummer boy. I'm pretty sure I was. Yes.
We had the goddamnedest riot you've ever seen.
Yes.
I forgot what happened because they won the match, but then we knocked one out on the floor and we beat the shit out of it. And then little Chewy, the little young 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid, and he was a cute boy. He ran in there to protect, I think, Thundercloud.
Yeah, because that was his son.
Back in the corner and looked at him, and oh boy, the women wanted to be his mother, and the girls wanted to go to bed with him. As he was a cute kid. And we got him, and we started beating his ass. And I never saw a crowd in Louisville that riled up. They literally attacked us. And it was 5 minutes before we could get out of the ring. And they ran the cops in, and boy, what a fight we had going back. From the ring to the back in Louisville, what, 50 feet, maybe.
Oh, God, no,
60?
longer, farther than that. No, in those days, especially when they had the whole building open, to probably at least 100 feet, at least 100, 125 feet.
And we were engaged the whole way to the back. That was one of the not the most violent riot I've ever been in, but damn, it was pretty intense. So
I remember because they brought Little Bear and Thundercloud in, and they gave them the push, put the belts on them first weekend, and that was when Little Bear could really work in his day, and he was still young enough to do it. And Chief Thundercloud had Chewy, and he was a wonderful young drummer boy. But they had the colorful, full-length Indian outfits. I mean, it wasn't just like a guy wearing a headdress. They had everything. They had the drums, the boots, the moccasins, the handmade beads, the vest. They looked fucking great. And they could work, and Thundercloud would sell, and Little Bear would work the people in, and he'd make the comeback. And the first couple of weeks spent working with you and David Schultz for the belts, and they really got over, and they had great matches. And then they had that riot, and then they started cutting off the fucking Indians push a little bit. I don't know if it was something Danny Little Bear did because he had a checkered past behind the scenes, or whether it was almost they got too much heat.
You know what I think it was too? You mentioned whether he did something. I think Little Bear, I think he may have had a roving eye a little too much, but for the younger ladies in the audience.
Ah, yes.
I think Miss Teeny found out about that, and that may have kind of downroaded them a little bit.
Yes.
Because they didn't want that. Now you talk about the Indians having the full dress and the colorful headdresses and the moccasin. I don't even think you could do that gimmick today.
No, I'm not sure. Somebody would take it the right, even though in Little Bear, in his case, I don't know about Thundercloud. I think he may have been Hispanic, but Little Bear was actually an Indian or a Native American, as they say. So but somebody would probably take it the wrong way if he was dressing up like his heritage. But I don't. That's right. I think. Yeah. So then maybe they might have rained on Thundercloud's parade.
But he was an Indian Mexican.
Well, he was descended from the Aztecs, I think, so they got a little bit of everything in them. But anyway, that's probably the only in-depth conversation about Danny Little Bear and Chief Thundercloud as a tag team on any wrestling podcast unless Brian Last has something on the 605 I'm not aware of. Probably the only one this week.
You never know.
Well, I'm sure that not a lot of people talk about Danny Little Bear, but he was good, and he was over to a point. Every time I was around him, he was. And because, where I first met Danny Little Bear?
Where?
We brought him up just a little bit earlier, territory. Kansas City.
Oh, my God. Yeah, he was big in Kansas City. He was huge in Kansas City. Well, huge was relative. What was huge in Kansas City was only moderately tiny in Charlotte or Greensboro.
Jimmy, the coldest I've ever been in my life was a trip in Kansas City. And we came back in on a Saturday night from Wichita, Kansas. And it's about 220 miles back to Kansas City from Wichita. And the next day we had some town way up in the top of Iowa. So between the Wichita and that Iowa, it's like 450 miles. And we had two shows on a Sunday. We no sooner we got back probably to Kansas City, probably about 2:00 in the morning. We had to leave at 8:00 in the morning to make those two shows. And I got in that van, and it was about 5 below zero. And we started driving toward that Iowa town. There's a bunch of us in this van. And I was in the back of it. And the heat never reached the back of the van. I almost froze to death by the time I got up there to that damn Iowa town. And then we worked the shows. Boom, hop in the van, go to it. We worked an afternoon show. Then we worked the night show. And I remember on the night show, it was still so cold. I had taken a shower. And when I was walking to the car, my hair that was still wet turned into ice. It was, ice, if you take, it just froze. So I just touched my hand and I could feel the ice breaking up. So I said, I made that trip twice that day.
Ugh.
My first and fucking last time I was going to make this trip. And I was gone, and they booked it again about a month later. Nope. I was gone. I actually gave my notice after that trip. I said, I can't take this, guys. And I didn't tell them that.
Yeah.
Then I left. But if I got to make those trips in this business, nah.
Were you there when
there's a lot of southern territories where you don't put up with that cold.
What were you in Smoky Mountain still, or was it right after you left when I brought Billy Black up? It was probably right after you went to Port. Remember, he used to team with Joel Deaton in Japan in the 90s. Outlaw Billy Black.
I remember him. He wasn't there, and I was there. No.
Outlaw Billy Black. He wasn't working in the United States at all, and he did great shit. He was good in the ring, and he was only working for it was all Japan for Baba. He and Joel Deaton were an underneath tag team, and he lived down in South Georgia. And I thought, nobody's using him. He does this great shit. Plus, he's got a good little outlaw, Bobby Black. He looks like a fucking disreputable outlaw, and we make him from the swamps of South Georgia. And he comes in, and he looked the part, right? And he can work. And I bring him in the first TV taping, and no problem with money. He agreed to whatever, and I put a TV title on him so that he could win on TV every week and get him over. And we did that the first TV taping, and then the next weekend he came up, and I guess it was going to be the 3 days like we used to do, one in Tennessee, one in Eastern Kentucky, one wherever up in the area. And he makes the first night. And then the next night up in like Barberville, Kentucky, we don't see him. And I never saw him again. He didn't make anything else. I call him up. Finally, we get back home. I call him on Monday. I said, Billy, where'd you go? He said, I saw the weather report. Apparently the weather in Eastern Kentucky was calling for 2 or 3 inches of snow. It was headed on to winter. So it was going to snow a couple inches. You've been to Barberville. That's probably the easiest place in Eastern Kentucky to get to. There's actually a highway somewhat near it. And it's fucking 2 inches of snow anyway, right? It's not like we're going to Boston, it's 2 feet. I said, 2 inches? He said, I'm a Southern boy. I don't want to get stranded up there in the mountains in the snow. You could walk out of fucking 2 inches of snow, right? So he said, I want to stay in a warmer climate. And I suggested to him at that point that he should stay in a warmer climate, a very warm climate. Forever. But the story, when I told the story, it was so ridiculous on the face of it. And people misunderstood it because some of the boys told it to some of the other boys. And then I heard in the primitive kayfabe sheets that they had at the time that Al Snow had run Outlaw Billy Black out of the Smoky Mountain territory. Billy Black was scared of Al Snow. To this day, people will ask me about, what was the problem between Al Snow and that guy when Al Snow ran that guy out of Smoky Mountain Wrestling?
Damn, how did those stories get started?
Because people are scared of 2 or 3 inches of snow. And I don't know what 2 and 3 inches and Al Snow have to do with each other. And I'm not going to speculate on that. But people with not a lot of sense and too much time on their hands. Speaking of which.
Well, Brian Lash, are you enjoying this conversation?
This is quite the conversation, I must say.
That email, once again, if you are interested in some of these prized possessions or just want to talk to Dirty Dutch Mantell and you're willing to pay him money, he is agreeable and negotiable. It's dirtydutchmantell@gmail.com. And you can inquire about some of the items and many more that we've discussed. And you can also, if you have any problems with any of the stories that we've told, you can complain to Dutch Mantell there. Come see him on June 2nd in Nashville. And what was it, June the 8th? In Memphis? June the 9th in Memphis.
And just follow me on the social media, on my Twitter, Dirty D Mantell, and you get all the information.
And thank you, Dutch, for being a part of the program today. And thank you, Brian, for sleeping through another scintillating interview.
I didn't want to ruin it. That was my
actually. Well, you got that right. If you'd have jumped in on it, you'd have ruined it for sure. So he's over there editing his new program.
Does Brian supposed to contribute here or do anything? What does he do? He just sits over there and listens to you?
Well,
that's what I'd like to know.
He does do. He sends the checks on time. Is all I can say.
Oh, well, that's good. Hey, Jimmy, great talking to you. Great talking to the caller, Cornette. You take care. Let's talk later.
All right. Thanks, Filthy. I'll talk to you soon. And for everybody else, we'll talk to you soon as well. We're not going to do a drive-through this coming Monday because of my schedule, but we will be back with the experience next week as scheduled and go from there. And Brian, if you have no other questions, you're free to leave as well.
I'm signing checks over here.
All right. Very good. Keep writing. Ladies and gentlemen, until we see you next week, in the meantime and in between time, thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye, everybody.